Hello, all my crafty people out there. It's time for our weekly project. If you haven't been here before, my name is Stephanie, and I upcycle thrifted items, generally from my local stores, and upcycle them into something new to wear or an accessory to wear. That being said, this week's project is going to involve these two pieces or pairs of linen pants. They're in good shape. I have worn them, but it's time for a change up. They need to be something else now. So, they're not going to go too far though. We're going to have a pair of shorts and a pair of pants, but we're going to combine them in order to get one of those. Anyway, I think it's going to be fun, pretty simple, and something that you might want to follow along with. So, if you like this kind of content, follow, like, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I'll see y'all at the table. All right, everybody, the first thing we need to decide is which is which. In other words, which is going to end up being a long pair of pants and which is going to end up being a pair of shorts. Now, given the season, the time of year, all of that, I think I want the taupe colored pair to be the long pants. I can wear them a little longer, not that we really pay attention to the white after Labor Day thing, but regardless, I'm going to make these the long pants, which means I'm going to cut these white ones off as shorts. So the first thing we're going to do is cut these off as shorts. Then we'll know how much leg we've got to work with to convert these. And we're not going to convert it just like sewing on the leg to the other one. It's going to be a little different. So we'll see. First things first is cutting these bad boys off. Now I went ahead and pressed them. Neither one of these are 100% linen, which is beneficial in many ways if you've ever had to care for linen and iron it and love it and hate it all at the same time. It's a pain in the tail. So, that being said, I'm kind of happy to change these up. And I'm just lining up everything by the hemline. I want to make sure those two hemlines are even. And that'll give me a nice cut up here. These have your typical linen outside exterior pockets. And I like that. And these are going to make a great pair of summer shorts. I had to turn those around because I wasn't thinking about how I was going to use this. This is my handy dandy ruler with this lip on the side that makes it so easy to hold on to my cutting board. Like I was hopefully saying, I usually have a 3-inch inseam, but I'm going to cut it down at 5. And the reason I'm cutting it that long is because I'm thinking I may want to not only hem these, obviously, but I may want to put a cuff in them because they're linen and, you know, that looks nice. So I'm going to cut this. We're not making any big fuss of it. And make sure I got it all the way through. Got to get through those seams. And there's our future pair of shorts. And I will show you what I do with those at the end as far as hemming and everything. And these are the legs we're going to use on the other pair of pants. Now, we're not doing a chop and switch. In other words, I'm not going to just tack these onto those other pants. Although I did measure them, the width of the leg is really even and equal on both sides. So that would be nice if I wanted to. But I don't need this much length. I kind of want my change up to be past my knee. That being said, I think I only need so many of these inches, and instead of doing it this way, we're going to do it this way. And I'm going to cut open one of these seams, preferably this seam that doesn't have any character to it. We're going to leave this seam. It's got some character, and that is what we're going to use as the kind of a flare, not a severe flare, but a flare at the bottom of the other pair of pants. The first thing we need to do, since we're going to be using that more decorative seam on the design, we need to open up the seam that's not decorative. Now, you can do it a couple of different ways. You could open it up with a seam ripper if you wanted to. But I think what I'm going to do, first I'm going to cut the bottom off of these pants and the hem, because I'm not going to need it. And I'm just going to snip in here so I can go around, and it's not going to matter if it's a perfect cut, because I'm going to end up taking this up possibly in the seam, or it might not even be used here at the raw edge. We'll see. But I don't need this to bulk up my process. So I'm going to just take this off. All right, once we take our hem off, I've got it turned inside out. And this again is our more decorative double stitched seam, like you would see in denim, or any kind of pants really, I guess. I'm folding it out where you can see this serge line. That's the other seam exposed. And I'm going to see if I can use my ruler to get that. I don't know if I can or not. It's not very straight. It might just be better to go ahead and take it off. But I'm going to take it off this way, and that way I won't have a seam left. But I'm going to be very close to the edge here. Very close to that seam line, because I don't want to lose any of this fabric. I do need what I have for length here, or width in this case, that's going to become length. So let me finish cutting these two legs up, and then we'll examine how much we're going to take off the taupe pair. All right, I've pinned where I want to cut off the pants, because this is how much I want to use, to change out. Let's cut the legs off for the taupey colored ones. So I am lining up the hemline down here on my grid as best I can, because it's got a rounded hemline. It's not perfect, but it's what I'm using as my gauge for the rest of my leg. I'm going to pin these together so I keep them straight. We use some quick clips here just to make sure we don't get them too offline, because that really is the only gauge I've got for when we make this cut. And a little bit more like this, and like this. We just want to make sure that push all of our fabric down, and we have this nice and straight. I'm feeling pretty good about that. Now it's not going to be straight on the side because those sides curve, but we're going to cut it off at 15 inches. Yeah, that's about the bottom of that. And we'll do this. And then I can remove that safety pin and just make sure we're 15 inches all the way across. So like that. Make sure just for giggles, yep, it's 15. Because I don't want to lose any more than I need. Hook my right there. Yeah, that should do it. I didn't really need to draw that line, just made me feel better. All right, now this fabric we're going to use as well. I have some ideas on embellishment for the bottom half of the leg, and we'll use this as the contrast. So here is our pair that we're going to add the legs to. So let me square up this part, and we'll start figuring out what we're going to do to embellish the leg before we attach it to our other leg. Okay, part of our embellishment I'd like to do on the leg is the little cat. This is a little outline. I printed it offline. It was a free print, so no craziness there. And you can just Google cat outline and find it. But I'm going to take one of these legs and I'm going to pin it to this, cut it out. And when I do that, I'm going to use this as kind of like a patch, an applique on the white part. I think it'll look really cute. All right, we have a couple of decisions to make. So far, the leg would fit almost exactly. In fact, by the time we put the seam on it, it probably would fit exactly into the leg that we removed. Here we go, like this. It's easier to look at it this way. And by the time you put the seam in, it would fit quite perfectly. But I'm thinking I want it to be a little wider at the bottom. So this is the leftover that was at the bottom that I cut off, and I've squared it up. It's about 2¼ inches. So I think maybe what I'll do is I will join that to the side here, one to each leg, obviously. And of course I don't need this length. So I'm just going to add that 2¼ inches and make this bottom half a little fuller than the original leg. Okay, I got the little ball of yarn appliqued on, and I actually used a foot that I had put on to do some pin tucking on the legs as a decoration, which I ended up not doing, but I used the pin tucking on here, and I don't know if you can see, but it made it a little more three-dimensional. Of course, like I said, all the blue lines are going to disappear once I wash it. But it's a double needle process, and it was already set up on the machine, so I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. So it actually worked really well. Gave it a little three-dimensional look. So now I've got to run my yarn from the ball over here. I think I'm going to run it like, I'm going to put it over the top of it, and then I'm going to come down and do a little dipping and turning and whatever else I got to do to make it interesting before I end up over on the other side. Okay, this is kind of what I'm thinking. I went ahead and sewed the extra little 2½ inch or 2¼ inch pieces on the sides, and I'll cut those off when I serge the bottom. But this is kind of what I'm thinking. You know, the cat on one leg, and I've used the inseam because it seemed to be the softest and the most flexible piece. And I'm just going to stitch down on top of it. I might even do some hand stitching on this. I'm not sure. I'm not really big on hand stitching, obviously. And then the other one would start over here on the other leg and finish and go across the little yarn ball to kind of complete it. I think that's how I want it to work. And then I decided to leave these excess panels, instead of putting them on the inseam, I'm going to put them on the outside, and I may decorate these with buttons. You know, just some extra bling. Who knows? Kind of going for broke on this one. Okay, I went ahead and put the yarn piece on, and then I ironed on my kitty afterwards. That way the yarn would be underneath him or her or it or whatever we're calling it. So now I have the fun task of appliquing the kitty on, which There's a lot of sharp angles in this, so watch, have fun. We'll see how it goes. I shortened my zigzag stitch, the length, to about 0.7. I think I can go smaller than that, but I'm just trying to get it as tight as possible, so maybe it won't be too bad to turn those curves. But I'm going to have to pivot quite a bit. I decided to put some buttons down the sides, so I'm going through some of my button stash to see if I have some buttons that'll work. Kind of looking for gray and kind of blue tones, maybe a little bit of blue here and there. Not sure if the blue will make it in, but I'm liking that. I wish I could do that color. I guess you could do anything you want, but I'm just trying to kind of make it a little bit monochromatic, and I'm still trying to decide if I want to put eyeballs on him. Gosh, I wish I had 2 of those. Okay, everybody, let's talk a minute about how we're going to connect this bottom half of the leg with the leg on the pants. And this is called Swiss insertion lace. It looks like this. And it has these little dots on the side. And if it was just these little dots, these little openings, it would be called entredot. That alone is called entredot. Anyway, what we're going to do, I'm going to try and do a French sewing, some shorts, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sewing the top of this salvaged end to one of these sides, and then I'll use the other side to attach it to the leg. So we're going to be adding about, it's not quite an inch, but it's a fair size. What is it? Well, about 3/4 of an inch is what we'll be adding. So what I'm going to do, and what I've done is I've cut it the length minus this blue seam allowance here. I've cut it the length of the pants that we're attaching it to. Now this is a little wider than that, so what that means is I'm going to run a gathering stitch on this, and I'm only going to do one because, yes, I'm being lazy. I'm not doing 2 gathering stitches because it doesn't have to be gathered drastically, and I'm not going to do pleats because I want it to look a little more even. So I'm going to run a gathering stitch around the top, and that'll be about 3.5 millimeter length, so it's nice and wide, and we'll pull the bobbin. Again, I'll do a short on that process too, on gathering. We're going to add this to it after I gather it at the top, and then once we do that, we will work on hemming it. Got to hem the raw edges down here that I've serged. Not very raw if I serged them, huh? I want to add the buttons and then add them to the pants. Now my husband's convinced that I need to add buttons to the rest of the pants up the side, but we're going to see how that works. Let me add this to the top here. Well, let me gather it, and then we'll add that to the top. Okay, we got the Swiss lace up top, Swiss insertion lace, whatever you want to call it. I think that's what it's called, up top. And again, I'll do a video on how this is done. It's a very clean way of doing it to make it work. It's just slightly gathered. So I didn't want it to be bulky. Now all I want to do is I want to hem this bottom. I'm going to turn my serge line in probably by an inch. I want a nice healthy hem. And then once I hem it, I'm going to get to work on my buttons that I'm going to put on the side. I'll see if I can show you a picture of my idea. if I can. But I'm going to put buttons down the side. And then we will connect these to the pants. Okay, everybody. I am almost through with all of my buttons being added to the side panels on the pants. And a special shout out and thank you to my Aunt Lynn, who was generous enough to stay on the phone with me for 2 hours while I did this. I needed that kind of distraction to get it done. So, thank you, Aunt Lynn. I will show y'all the end of this as soon as I'm finished with this. We'll get to sewing this last piece to the pants and we'll try them on. Okay, it's time to put the leg on. We've got our kitty cat leg here. And this is the Swiss lace or insertion that we're going to attach to the end of the pants that we've already cut off. Now we're sewing these right sides together, so that means we have to turn one of them inside out. So we're going to turn the leg inside out. And we're going to make sure that our buttons are on the outside seam and that our kitty cat is in the front. So we'll pull the leg out right here, make sure that the front is matching the front. So this is our cat, this is our front pocket. We should be in good shape. Just want to pull it up and kind of shake it out. Look in there, make sure. And I found that the best thing to start with was I want this side seam to look good. Obviously, that's the one that shows the most. So I'm pinching the two side seams of this insert that we put the buttons on to find the center of that piece. And when we find the center of that piece, we want to line that up and just kind of finger pressing it. We want to line it up with the outer seam, the more decorative seam of the gray pants. So just going to kind of center it over that seam, our little finger pressing there. And just going to pin around. I admit I already did the other leg because, you got to test it out first. And I did not have any excess fabric on either side. It worked out quite perfectly. So fingers crossed it should do the same on this side. As long as they're somewhat decently made pants, they should be even. So I'm going to pin these right sides together all the way around. And then when I'm done with that, I'll take them to the machine and I will sew them with, again, I'm going to try and do a short on some heirloom sewing, but I'm going to stitch in the ditch right along the edge of what is considered the Swiss insert, but it's entre-deux on the side here. So I'm going to stitch in the ditch there, and then I'm going to go 1/16 of an inch right above it and put another stitch, clip the edge down to that stitch, and do a small zigzag all the way around. That's the way you put this kind of insertion together with the fabric, with flat fabric. The same way with the gathered end, it's the same process. So I'm going to go do this after I pin all this, make sure it's lined up, because if I had a little hitch where there was a little piece of fabric, a gather or bunch or whatever, I would probably just put it on the inseam. I did not make these as full as I might have liked to at the bottom, but I do think that they're going to still look super cute. So I will be back and we'll be trying these babies on. Okay, everybody. It's been a while since I had to take this far back a stance, but it's the only way I can show you the pants. They turned out, I think, super cute. I got buttons down the side. I got my kitty cat in the front. His little yarn rolls over to his yarn ball and more buttons. And I'm pretty excited about them. Now, they are not as flared as I was thinking I was going to do, but I am glad I put the extra panel in because it does give a little more fullness at the bottom. And I'm just wearing with a simple white shirt or even a blue blouse, I guess. Maybe something blue. Anyway, I hope y'all had fun. I did. It's a good way to change up some clothes you got tired of wearing. If you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will catch y'all on the flip side of our next project.